Hello and welcome to A Word with Ward, a podcast focused on the high-growth world of data centers. In Series 1, I speak with some of the most prominent entrepreneurs of the industry. Those who've either already founded, scaled and exited businesses in this space, or who are currently on that journey. If you've got an interest in the industry, these are the people that you're going to want to hear from. I think I'm going to learn a thing or two along the way, and if you give it a listen, you might too. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by my guest, Randy Brouckman. Randy is the co-founder and CEO of EdgeConnex, leveraging over 30 years of experience in telecoms, software, and data centers. Under his leadership, EdgeConnex has become a leading provider of innovative data center solutions and was recognized as the top workplace of the year for 2 consecutive years. Before EdgeConnex, Randy was a partner and entrepreneur in residence at TDF Ventures and held key roles such as CTO, COO, and CEO at companies including BSG Clearing Solutions and Iridium. His career began at Bellcore, where he advanced to Executive Director of Network Operations Systems and led Nextel Ventures division. Okay, good morning, Randy. Welcome to the show, and thanks very much for taking the time to join me.
My pleasure, Ward. Thank you.
So, look, this series is all about founder journeys. You're in year 15 of your voyage with EdgeConnex now, as I understand it. But one of the things I'm really interested in is origin stories of businesses. So with that in mind, could I please take you back to 2009? You know, you've already served as CTO, COO, and CEO of several successful public and private entities. And you and Edmund Wilson get together to launch EdgeConnex. So can you talk to me around, your burning ambition to start the business back then?
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned Edmund right up front because we wouldn't be here without him. It's truly a co-founder relationship. I think somewhat amazingly even to this day. He is our chief operating officer. I'm plagued with having to be the CEO. So that's kind of how it unfolded. Yeah. So the time is 15 years. Huh? Went quick. If I rewind it, it was 2009. So let me kind of talk about a few things that were happening back in that time frame. The economy was horrible. Just keep that in mind. The economy was horrible. LTE wasn't there. Netflix was shipping DVDs, right? Not like that was maybe even one of the, if not the biggest users of the Postal Service in terms of distributing content. iPhone was on version 2. The world was dealing with closed gardens and, open gardens and all the rest of it. And we were pre-LTE, right? We were a 3G world, but LTE was there. It was ready. And in particular in our world in 2009, backhaul was still largely microwave, copper, hey, do I need a T1 maybe or a DS3? Right? It's a kind of interesting world that it was in terms of lit services background. And so the simple premise we had was, and I got to give Edmund and some of the early folks the credit here, was, wait a second, let's for wireless to become an on-ramp, to enable LTE, we're going to need fiber to get all the way to the cell sites. Seems obvious today, but let's do this in such a way that you pull fiber once, have a small co-location facility at the cell site, put your electronics there, serve customer one, maybe T-Mo, maybe then with the same fiber, the same hut, you'd be able to light up Verizon and AT&T, et cetera. Sprint at the time, right? A little bit different day and age. And then it's funny, back then we had a stage 2 that we would then move Akamai out as far as the cell site. And it was interesting to note that that's what happens when you let an engineer be marketing. It was literally called phase 2. So the thinking was that wireless can become a good and viable on and off ramp. That to do that, you're going to require fiber to go further and deeper into the networks. The minute you build a highway like that, just like if you build a physical highway, it doesn't matter how many lanes you put in, cars fill it, right? Build a 4-lane highway, a year later it's filled. Build an 8-lane highway, a year later it's filled. That the same thing would happen. Now, it wouldn't be cars, it would be filled with bits. We kind of guessed right that it would be filled with video bits, and those have different economics associated with them. And that was the grand plan. So we were going to make wireless a viable on-ramp, off-ramp. We were going to get content closer to the consumer to do that as a result of that in stage 2. And it was a wireless world, and so be it. Needless to say, that is not EdgeConnex today, by the way. So we'll talk about that journey. You asked about my burning desire. I don't know if it's a burning desire or an inability to handle downtime. Like I don't do well with a beach vacation, a chair, an umbrella, and a book. I like to read, but the other things sound horrible to me. Right? Let me a boogie board and go hit the big waves. I'm all in for that kind of a vacation. And quite frankly, I was sitting there with some interesting downtime. It was, as you noted, I'd been fortunate to have had the company I'd just been running. Prior to that, we'd had a successful IPO and then had the great fortune of having a public company get bought by a bigger public company. And then, frankly, better to be lucky than good. We happened to sign our deal on April 1st, 2007, about the very day the market peaked. So I'd like to tell you it was my great foresight and incredible leadership as CEO that we did that. That's nonsense. It was total luck. So that took about a year and change to close down, and I was getting bored. So idle time wasn't good. Now, the other thing I mentioned at the beginning was a rough economy. We actually saw this as an opportunity to solve a real problem, put infrastructure in place, which meant we had a great business model. Put your CapEx forward and then get a long-term recurring revenue stream. That stays consistent with the business today. And, look, a model that can do that can also then create a lot of jobs, a lot of opportunity, a lot of growth. And, I think we understood before it was in vogue that real infrastructure was all about digital infrastructure, that's where the world was going. These were the highways of the future. And that's how we got going. And by the way, we noodled it around a bit. Obviously it wasn't a straight line, and I'm sure you'll ask some questions about that. But, we started it using spare miles we had and a credit card, and raised our first money, small VC round spread across 3 VCs in May of 2010.
Fascinating. Okay. And look, I was listening to a seminar on YouTube recently that you held at the Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Michigan many moons ago. And during that, you talked about pivoting the business in around 2012, I think. So can you talk to me about that period and what led you to that pivot and what the results were?
Yeah, I would term that a customer-led pivot. What we did was listen to our customers. The good news was we had the big idea right? Fiber was going deeper and further in the network. Yes, in fact, the highways that were built were being filled. They were being filled with video. We didn't quite have right how far out the content had to move, but we had the right idea. You had to flatten the internet. 5 or 6 peering points of the internet were not going to work. We were going to have to go deeper and further, and pretty much any market was going to need to get content localized and try to keep it in the metro region, if you will. And quite frankly, I give a tremendous amount of credit to our friends at Comcast, who maybe were feeling the pain, by having to carry all this content, market to market to market over a backbone network. But they had a desire to do a couple of things, and it really coalesced real well. At the time, Comcast was building the first versions of their video platform, record any show, anytime, play it back, any device, anywhere. That service, right? Build up your video library, if you will. At the same time they're doing that, they're also recognizing how much streaming is happening of third-party content, the over-the-top content that we take for granted today. And we got to talking, and it was amazing on kind of frankly how few users it took to really bring a network to its knees, a backbone network to its knees, with that much content moving over large distances. And back then, you think about it, you remember the old spinning pinwheel and pixelization you used to get when you clicked on a video link. And it was kind of like, oh, God, is this really going to work or not? We're not that far forward in it. Anyway, they described the problem to me. So it was a real problem. We talked about their facilities and can we use their facilities or does it require new facilities? And what's the complexity of bringing third-party vendors inside their network facilities? Oh, guess what? Their network facilities were built as DC battery comms plants with low power density. And we're sitting in a world of 10x the density per rack required, and it's AC powered, and it's like doesn't quite work and configure. And I guess a couple things. Look, we told Comcast right there that their facilities aren't what they're not going to take them to the next gen. And I give a gentleman, John Shantz, a lot of credit. He was the chief network officer of Comcast at the time. He goes, "Thank you for not blowing smoke up me. You told me the truth. You told me what didn't work and did work." So he throws me the pen and says, "Well, what's going to work?" And together we came up with the concept of an edge data center. This was 2012. And we were going to put these edge data centers. They had to be within 2 to 5 kilometers of the outer ring primary aggregation points on their network. And when you type www.youtube.com, that request would go to the aggregation router, then would go to this edge data center where hopefully Google was caching content as an example. And all that content would stay in market. In that same edge data center, they would put that video platform I talked about before, and then the likes of an Akamai could open up. And of course, that gives you, in those days, ESPN and HBO and all the rest of it. And, we'd like to see a Netflix and all the rest of them get on there, and they ultimately have. Anyway, fast forward, we did a handshake agreement. So this is going to do a few things. It's going to open the network to third parties and allow them to take video platform and new video services anywhere in America. And at the same time, completely flatten the internet architecture. So from this hierarchical peering to this kind of flattened architecture. We actually did the first edge data center. We did a handshake agreement on December 19th of 2012 to do that. We had to have the center live by June 2013. By the way, we didn't actually sign the contract because, bureaucracy had to get in between to see, a good handshake that happened in December. We didn't sign it till May. But we had that data center up and running in Houston, was our first market, by the end of June 2013. What I didn't talk about with the kids at University of Michigan is I actually bet Edmund and I bet the whole company on it. At the time, we had won a contract actually consistent with what we'd started, doing backhaul. In particular, we were running backhaul for 3,000 cell sites for what was at the time Sprint, getting fiber there so their LTE deployment could catch up. And for a whole bunch of reasons, which were painful, that shifted into more of a services contract than a recurring contract than what we'd originally envisioned. But it allowed us some decent cash flows up front. We had a little bit of cash. We actually took it all, built this edge data center at risk because we didn't have the contract in place. Here's great news. Comes August and the thing's up and running, and a few things happen. Perceived internet improvement, 25, 30% to the end user. More importantly, the spinning pinwheel and the pixelization, gone. interesting result of that is video abandonment improved by 85%, 86% technically. So now all of a sudden, video becomes a real interesting ad insertion mechanism. If people aren't going to abandon it, you end up with a whole other, obviously, monetization stream. What's interesting at that point, Ward, was we were asked to do across Comcast and Cox Communications and Charters. We won the mandate to build 23 data centers in 24 months and an entirely new private peering infrastructure across the United States in markets that, frankly, you'd say we're the non-Equinix markets, roughly speaking. I mean, they are who they are, and they're, amazing at interconnection. And that was our start. We brought content closer to the consumer with these location-sensitive data centers because we listened to the customer. There's a real customer problem. We listened to them. And then, boy, were we nimble. Took the risk. I mean, maybe took the biggest risk possible. And, did it to scale. Before we built the first one, though, we actually designed it to scale. And I'm sure we'll be talking about scale because that's so hard. It's so many startups don't think about scale first. And we actually have the mindset, think scale first, not second.
Great. Okay. Really interesting evolution of the business there. Are there any other iterations of the business or particularly memorable growth periods that you're proud of?
I'll pick up on the story, on the theme. Continue to listen to your customers. The same time we got the content moved closer to the consumer, we got calls from two of the big U.S. hyperscalers. We use those terms today. They were called cloud providers then. Just as the cloud wars were entering their 2015 phase of cloud wars, we got calls from, not shockingly, two of the three, and now, of course, all of them, the astute cloud providers in the U.S. saying, hey, guys, you got it. Content closer to the consumer gives this reliable experience, much improved experience. We want to do the same thing in the cloud. Can we bring cloud closer to the enterprise? So it isn't just internet best efforts. Pick up the phone, call our customers at the cable guys, let's just say as an example, can you bring your business nodes in? Can we peer cloud there? And as we're having that discussion, the cloud guys are like, hey, this is great. But by the way, the other thing we've noticed is you really have created this concept of location-sensitive data center. You all bring the data center to where we need it as opposed to making us come to a data center. So yeah, you got it. That's who we are, right? Hey, here's the idea. Solve your customer's problem where they need it solved. Not that novel of a concept, but different in an industry that thought of itself as real estate, right? Different from a little bit of a different twist. And so you get to 2015, and we've got the cloud guys saying we want to get cloud closer to the enterprise. At the same time, the early availability zones are exploding. They need child nodes and additional nodes. And so they asked us, hey, you built these pretty modular, because we didn't want to build snowflakes. We didn't really build 23 data centers in 24 months. We built one data center 23 times, right? And built it in such a way that it could double and double and double and keep growing. They said, how big can it go? And of course, being the entrepreneurs we are, as big as you need. Little did we know. And they said, hey, can you do this in Europe? We happen to already be doing the edge in Europe. The same problems that had hit the U.S. we're hitting in Europe with the content and the backbone networks and so on. So we were there, and then asked to see how big we could do for let's call it an availability zone expansion, needing large child nodes. And one thing leads to another, and by the end of 2015, we're circling up a single node expansion of 35 megawatts, which at the time was enormous for this industry, was an enormous opportunity. We landed that deal, again, bet the company, because we had never done financing of those types of hyperscale deals. So we kind of worked with the banks and came up with the whole project financing concept, another innovation. I think we were one of the early innovators and leaders in bringing to this industry. So bet two, bet the farm again. Had great equity partners at that point in time that allowed us to do that. And now you see a story today of a business that's coming up on 80 data centers on a global scale, operating in 21 countries. Frankly, at the size and scale the customers need. I think today, at the size, scale, and density the customers need is probably the better way to think of these problems that we have to solve and to solve them. So that's my story. Again, I'd love to tell you we're that brilliant, but basically I think what we try to do is listen to the customers.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that growth story is just phenomenal. Look, I think it's fair to say it's fairly unique for the original founder to still be operating the business as CEO once it's scaled to the extent that EdgeConnex has. The Harvard Business Review found that successful CEO founders are in the minority. It found 50% of founders were no longer CEO by the time their ventures were 3 years old, and by 4 years old, 40% were in the corner office. So can I ask you, Randy, what's your secret to still being here, not 3, not 4, but 15 years later, managing a multi-billion-dollar company?
Yeah, I think a couple of things, Ward. First, I think both Edmund and I started our careers at scale companies and in scale, right? So we didn't set out to do a startup. We set out to build an enterprise. It wasn't meant to be a feature. It wasn't meant to be a bug. It wasn't meant to be a quick flip. We set out to do a scaled infrastructure company. Was I so brazen as to think it would be this big and this global? No, I wasn't. I underestimated probably what I thought we could do. But we never set out to make it a, if you will, let's start this and see where it goes. It was really set up to be that way. And since we'd both come from scale operations, I started my career in the Bell system in the United States. So, it doesn't get any bigger than that, at least at the time. The second thing was we never did the first thing until we had figured out the processes, the systems, the tools, and what it would require people-wise. We didn't have to hire them all, but what it would require people-wise to do it at scale. Because there's no sense in doing it if it can't be scaled, replicated and scaled, especially in the digital infrastructure space, right? The worst thing you can do is build snowflakes, right? That is the worst thing you can do from cost efficiency, from customer consistency, from reliability, et cetera. You just don't want to do that. So I think we set out to do that from the beginning. The other reason why we're still here, we're passionate, right? It's been about the journey as opposed to the destination. It hasn't been about the money first by any stretch of the imagination. Worked out fine, but not the reason we set out to do it. And if you kind of referenced this earlier, it was a tough economy at the time. And we actually believed in the mission. We actually believed in the greater good mission we were doing for people, that we were solving a real problem, that this was going to be valuable. So kind of we set out with different goals maybe than sometimes people think about in different parts of the country.
Thanks for listening to A Word with Ward. We're not funded by anybody, so we don't have any hidden agenda. We're just talking to some of the most interesting people in data centers. We have had some help creating some of our questions from Sixth Sense Consulting, business psychologists and executive coaches for teams and individuals. We partner with Sixth Sense during the assessment phase when delivering executive search assignments. If you've got any burning questions you want to ask a data center entrepreneur in Series 1, please drop me a line at ward@thewayofward.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Before the break, Randy and I were talking about his burning motivation to start EdgeConnex, along with his co-founder Edmund Wilson, along with some of the customer-centric pivots that he and the business made over the years, and how he bucks the trend still being in the top seat of the organisation 15 years later. In the second half, we're going to talk about how EdgeConnex received the highest ranking in Structure Research State of Environmental Impact Report. We'll also cover some of the biggest lessons learned during his entrepreneurial journeys, the future of the sector, and what people aren't talking about that he thinks they should be. But the next question is all about what we can expect to see from EdgeConnex in the future.
What you'll see from EdgeConnex, I think a couple of things here. Look, we think part of this epicenter of what's happening in AI. It is wonderful to see. It's a real I think it's a real game changer for ultimately the economy, for people, for skill sets, for what they can do, for where they'll spend time. There's a real interesting opportunity here. As far as EdgeConnex is concerned, we want to be in a position to provide the infrastructure to our customers when and where they need it, at the scale they need it, and more importantly, future-proof it for the densities that they're going to need it to support. So I think you're going to see a lot of growth there. I think that's going to manifest itself, and you're going to see some of our markets just go to really big campus scale or multi-campus scale type markets. You'll see us enter a few new markets for sure. I think we'll see where the intersection of regulatory matters end up and where power matters end up. That will also dictate where some of those things go. But when you built your roots on listening to your customer, being nimble, and being able to bring the data center to where they need it, not, I own land here, come see me, is a very different business model, right? That location sensitivity, that listen and move, listen and learn, I think positions us as well there. On a personal level, I think we've gotten to the size and scale where, as a CEO, I think about what am I doing here in 24 and 25 that sets the table, oddly enough, for 26, 7, and 28. The great news is I've got this amazing team of people that, like 24, 25, the machine's got to do what it's got to do, and the engine's got to perform the way it needs to perform, and it is, which means I can focus the energies on the investments we make today that our customers need us to make today so that we can support their needs 3, 4, 5 years out. So I'm not going to share too much of what I'm doing there for obvious reasons, but that's where I'm kind of spending my time.
Great. Okay. And I, maybe you'll need to keep this a little bit closer to your chest, but are you able to talk about what that growth might look like from a regional perspective, given that you are, very much a global organization today?
So, I'll net through it all. You see, we are global, and I think that's a truly a feature, not a bug, right? We think it's become important from the strategic discussions, the planning discussions. I think gives us an interesting bird's eye view of what's happening. And it's interesting to see when I net it all out, you see immediate growth, say in the Americas, but then not as, by the way, the timeframes of how quick cloud grew in each region, the gaps between those, that is shortening in AI. I believe that will shorten in AI. But you'll see, you may see Asia get ahead of Europe while it sorts out its regulatory challenges, and then Europe gets going. But I think you're also going to see things like the Middle East rise up to be bigger zones and regions than they were before. I'm still strong and long on India as a type of market, a sub-market, obviously, within Asia, but a market in and of itself that's just enormous. So in any given year, I think you'll see these ebb and flows, bigger activity, lesser activity, more activity, less activity. But if I net it out over kind of 3 to 5 years, I actually think you'll see, I don't want to say in pure numbers of megawatts, the same growth region to region to region, but you're going to see a proportionate uplift in each region happening. So it'll be interesting. It doesn't happen all at the same time, but is going to happen over, the ups and downs get kind of smoothed out when you look at it on a global scale.
Great. Okay. Look, I understand sustainability is of paramount importance to EdgeConnex, and that the business appears to be leading the way on this in many respects. So, last year, the business received the highest ranking in the Structure Research State of Environmental Impact Report, whilst earlier this year, one of your Amsterdam data centers achieved platinum status in zero operational waste to landfill. So can you talk to me about the business's overall approach and your overall approach towards sustainability, and how you managed to rank so highly in the areas I've just mentioned?
Hey, thank you for doing the background research on that. I like when other people say it and we don't have to say we care, because I'd rather people see that and let the results speak for themselves. Where I'm going to take this in a couple of parts. First, that we have something we say at every all hands meeting, at every leadership meeting, and I probably say it 10 times a day. Our job is to take care of our customers, our people, and our planet. That's the only three things I need us to focus on as a leadership team. Take care of your customer, take care of our people, take care of the planet. Frankly, the rest will take care of itself. And I think we do that right now. I'm sure that somebody's going to grumble that we're not doing enough of that in the right place, because we all have that happening. But I think it's more than words to us. I think you see it in our actions. So when we think about this, when we think about sustainability, that really hits heavy. That is, by the way, you need all three of those activity in all three of those areas to achieve that. I think there's a few things that have allowed us to succeed. All disciplines in the company are engaged in our sustainability efforts. This isn't a side team's job. All disciplines have a role and are active in our sustainability efforts. Do we have leadership out of each of the functional areas? Yes. Is there an overall team lead? Yes. But everyone's job, it's part of everyone's job. I think secondly, we're blessed with having an investor. EQT is our investor. For those of you that don't know, it's a Swedish-based private equity and infrastructure fund, one of the largest in the world of both infrastructure investor as well as private equity investor. And while it is our passion, customers, people, and planet, I think it is safe for me to say it's hardwired in their DNA around sustainability. And it's nice to have your shareholder alignment and your alignment very much in sync there. Then I think the next and third or fourth element in this case of why we've been successful in our sustainability efforts is, look, we set our goals, we measure our goals, we report on our goals, we report on our goals publicly, we report on our goals to our board of directors. And where we're short, we admit it, and we put mitigation plans in place to get it. It isn't real if you don't define what you're going to do up front, measure what you're doing along the way, and publicly, and even in our case at the board level, in a manner where every year we have to read out on both our goals and our results. People pay attention. It's not something we talk about. It's something we, frankly, measure ourselves and, hold ourselves to a high standard on our execution.
Fantastic. Okay. And look, if there were any entrepreneurs within this industry who are listening to this podcast or maybe a bit earlier on in the journey than you are, can you talk about what you see as, the biggest and best lessons you've learned throughout your journey so far?
So I'm probably you mentioned the Center for Entrepreneurship at Michigan. Been working on putting together what would be my next 6 lectures at Michigan. And if I kind of walked through some of the things that I'd love to share and have shared with some startups along the way, I guess maybe 6 or 7 lessons that I'd share. Hire people that are really good at what you're not good at, right? Surround yourself with people that are better than you. Put the right people in the right place and give them the tools to do their job, right? That's just, you can't be good at everything. In fact, I'm good at very few things. And even the things I'm good at, I want to hire people that are better than me because, it does nothing but make you better and allow you to focus on bigger things. Number 2, and you guys are probably going to want to edit this out, how many times I've said it, customer. Listen, learn, adjust, and respect, right? It's just, they're the reason you exist, right? It isn't about the tech. It isn't about the idea. It's about the customer, the problem, their needs. And and being fair, right? Look, this is, and coming up with a fair solution. I guess maybe, 2.5 lesson there related is solve a real problem, right? Solve real problems. And by the way, focus when you solve them. You can't solve all problems. Solve real, make sure you keep your focus. Some I give a lot of early stage guys advice, and I walk them through processes on how to do this. Raise money when you don't need it. Don't wait to raise money when you need it. It's way too late. So when you raise your A round, think about what the B round is. Start talking to the people you're going to want your B round money to come from. Show them the roadmap you're going to execute. Share with them the roadmap. Share with them why you're succeeding. Share with them why you're hitting speed bumps. Turns out when you go to raise the B round, they'll be a lot more interested in doing that. But that applies, we've gone through venture, we've gone through private equity, we're into, infrastructure and beyond today, right? So, but this applies all the way through. Raise money when you don't need it. Raise it long before you need it. Let's put it that way. Fourth, fail fast and learn from your mistakes, right? Not all ideas are good ideas. Not everything works. If you're going to fail fast, learn from your mistakes, and move on, right? 5, be nimble, but don't be chaotic, right? Sometimes people want to go fast, they're hurrying, right? Being fast and being disciplined can happen in the same sentence. So be nimble, but don't be chaotic. Boy, as I look back to 2009, 2010, 2011, the advice that I guess I had to give myself and Edmund and I had to give each other is look past the haters and the non-believers. See the future they can't. Right? I cannot tell you how many people told me that I didn't understand how networks work. Now, mind you, I spent 10 years in the Bell systems, had a kind of an idea how it worked. How many people told me I didn't understand how IP networks work, that 6 peering points was more than enough to cover the United States of America? Okay. The last one, and maybe arguably the most important one, is stay humble. The minute you start thinking you're a big deal, you're not, right? Stay humble, right? There's always somebody bigger, better. The innovation never stops. You start believing your own, drinking your own Kool-Aid. Somebody's going to sneak up with a lot better mousetrap than you. For me, it's been more about the journey than the destination. I don't know where it's going to end, but I know this journey's been a heck of a good time.
Fantastic. Really dropped a good number of pearls of wisdom there, Randy, so thanks for that.
Maybe I can do a whole semester's worth of lectures that way. So each one deserves a deep dive.
All right, so I'm going to finish the podcast on a couple of questions that I've been asking to, I think, everyone who's been a guest so far. So the first it's quite a broad question, so please feel free to answer it in any way you see fit. But what do you see as the future of the sector?
Yeah, look, I think it has a bright future, but we have work to do. So I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of growth. There's continues to be growth in the cloud. I think enterprises and startups in particular are realizing the value and the power of the cloud and the ability to have an asset-light company and get going with massive access to compute and storage and network and so on. Cloud provides you. I think AI is the opportunity to be transformative and build another economy on top of it. And I think about my lifetime, my at least working lifetime, I've been fortunate to see the PC revolution, dating myself a little bit, the internet revolution for sure, the mobile revolution. I actually think AI we're not there yet, but I actually think AI can become that level of platform, and you'll see an entire economy built on top of it. It will permeate almost every work discipline, enterprise discipline. It has the opportunity to create new companies and new concepts and levels of robotics and all kinds of things we haven't even envisioned, right? We haven't thought about. Could transform R&D in the healthcare industry. Just we haven't even begun to think of it. So, look, we're going to need data centers to be a big part of that digital infrastructure to make that happen. But to do that, by the way, I think we have to change how people think of data centers, right? Like data centers are good for humankind, not bad. Data centers are good for communities, not bad, right? COVID was horrible in many ways, but the world continued on, for some maybe even in a better way. That's because of the data centers, right? I don't want one. Okay, think about that before you say it. So I think it's incumbent on us as an industry to start to show the benefits and the importance, and to understand that tomorrow's infrastructure, or really today's infrastructure, is more about the digital infrastructure than it is even about the roads and the ports, or as much as it is at least about the roads and the ports that are out there. And so we have to do a better job of explaining how this brings value to the community. And it does. It creates not only jobs in and of itself, but a 10 to 20-fold factor on top of it, where when you start building these campuses over 10 or 15 years, that's tremendous amounts of skilled labor jobs as well. Then there's ecosystems that form around that, for the supply networks that feed into it, the maintenance networks that feed in on these big capital projects. These are good things. They provide infrastructure, they provide taxes. Some of the healthiest data center districts happen to have some of the best new schools and new facilities around. I don't think that's completely non-linked. Let's put it that way. I think there's a pretty tight linkage between that. So we got to do some work to with the communities and make sure that we're helping them understand in their speak and how we can help the communities. If we do that, there's a real opportunity to power that next transformational technology, which frankly, on top of that, a whole economy can be built.
Absolutely. Okay.
That's my big dream.
Great. Okay. And final question is, what, in your opinion, Randy, are people in the industry not talking about that you think that they should be?
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit more about how we bring value to the communities that I just mentioned to you. That today's critical infrastructure is in fact digital infrastructure. Then if I fast forward a little bit, and I think we're talking about it, but I think we need to also be talking about the fact that, hey, look, there's a skills challenge that sits in front of us all as an industry, and we're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to create this new economy. We're going to need more electricians. We're going to need more civil. We're going to need more construction workers. We're going to need more plumbing and mechanical type skill sets, and quite frankly, a lot more technical operations.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, look, Randy, really appreciate you taking the time to join me. Found that conversation riveting, and I wish you and the wider team all the best as you continue your success.